everyone, welcome to What It's Like To. Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you about another podcast I think you'll like. It's a podcast for the oddballs, weirdos, and iconoclasts who transcend all categorization. It's called Misfits Making It, Oddballs Doing Cool Stuff. With a penchant for irreverently heartwarming humor, comedian Lauren LaGiudice thoughtfully interviews fellow misfits. You'll meet creatives from SNL, Netflix, Late Night, Comedy Central, The New Yorker, Vanity Fair, and lots more, as well as indie musicians, comedians, writers, artists, and entrepreneurs. What they all have in common is they're all oddballs and they're all doing cool stuff. Okay, now on to today's episode.
I had a meltdown and I was upset with myself. How does a person with literally 17 international awards for cakes go home on a cake challenge? That was just going to be the worst day ever. I was like, how embarrassing. But you're saying you're never going to sell another cake again. Who's going to trust you to make a cake if you can't even make a cake on TV?
Hello, and welcome to What It's Like To, the podcast that lets you walk in someone else's shoes and live vicariously through their unique experiences. I'm your host, Elizabeth Pearson Garr, and each episode I'll be asking a new interviewee all the what, why, when, and wheres of how they do what they do. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you may know that I used to work at the Food Network right when it was first starting up. I've always loved cooking and baking, and I still love watching reality shows, so I'm really excited about my guest today. Adesuwa Elaiho is one of 12 chefs competing on the Food Network's Halloween Baking Championship. Adesuwa is the founder and executive chef of Asukar, a premier pastry company in San Antonio, Texas. She has a degree in food science from Colorado State University and studied culinary arts at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. Adesuwa, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to talk to you. So we have a lot of things I'd love to hear about, but first of all, I'm wondering about being on this show. Do you feel like you could kind of summarize it in a word or a phrase? What did it feel like being there? Was it overwhelming? Was it exciting, stressful? Can you even summarize it?
Yeah, for me, the season was validation is what my word of the season is validation. Oh. And it was a dream come true.
So is this something you've been wanting to do for a long time, to be on a show just to get more visibility? Or is it just so you could get a greater challenge? Or had you been trying to be on a show for a while?
No. So as a small child, instead of watching cartoons, I would sit in my house and watch Food Network all day and watch Paula Deen religiously. And I was like, can you watch a cartoon? And I'm like, no, I cannot watch a cartoon. I have to keep up with Rachel Ray's, 30-minute meal, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah.
And so I used to make jokes with friends about being on a show. I had some different YouTube things I used to do. And I would say, hey, Food Network, thanks for tuning in and watching me. And then also when I was a small kid, me and my cousin Bryant used to have the A&B cooking show. And we would pretend we cook breakfast in the morning, we have our own little TV show. But I really never thought that, I think you want something, but I never really took any action to be on the show. So for me, it was a great day when I was reached out to saying, hey, we see you. And for me, again, just being seen by Food Network to me was huge validation and just years of hard work coming together.
So it was super exciting, obviously, to get that call and then to be cast in the show. I had read, actually, I wonder if I can read it. You said, I worked really hard to think through different scenarios the judges might throw at us, but of course there was no way to know exactly what we would encounter. So what were you thinking? I mean, you knew it was Halloween, but it could kind of be anything from there, right? Halloween and baking, that still leaves a pretty broad range. How did you prepare?
So my strategy was to binge watch literally every single season that was available. So I downloaded Discovery Plus and I watched, they don't have season 1 on there, but I watched season 2 to season 8 in a very short period of time and just tried to understand what was coming up for the show. I was very nervous about, I was cautious when I first initially started looking at coming onto the show. I didn't really know too much what it was all about. So I was really relieved when I noticed that it was a lot about flavors and then combinations of flavors as much as it was decorating. I'm a wedding cake decorator. I do beautiful artsy things. We do very like abstract designs at Asukar. So this was definitely a step out of my comfort zone. So I really had to dig deep and like figure out, okay, how do I make a clown cake? Like, what does that even look like? Like in
Yeah.
my bakery, I don't use fondant at all. I really try to stray away from it. I try to take like realistic food. Like this past weekend, we did a steak cake. I wanted a T-bone steak. Mine was made out of buttercream. So I really try to take like a fondant design and figure out how to make it into a buttercream design. But that also eats into your time. So it's kind of like, what do if you have no time? And I think that was the most challenging part, was the time, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure because they have that clock ticking. I mean, as soon as he tells you
Hmm.
what the challenge is, the seconds start ticking
Yep.
down.
And I think like in my head, like I had never done anything like this in my life. So I didn't really know what to expect. But I was like, there's no way that they're really giving people 90 minutes to get this stuff done, right? Like
Yeah,
in my mind, I was
right.
like, that's made for TV. No, they tell you it's 90 minutes, it's 90 minutes. Like that's what you have to figure it out. So it's really impressive what all of us have been able to come up with in such a limited amount of time. And then I always had thought, there has to be some time for us to conceptualize what we want to do. But really, it's like, here's your challenge, here's your stuff, go bake. And it's kind of like, okay, cool, let me dig deep and try to figure out what I can come up with in such a short period of time.
Yeah, so that amazes me too, because you might have 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours. And if they say, make this clown cake, make these gory donuts. And in this show too, they have a story that goes along with it for people that might have
Mhm.
not watched the baking challenge before. There's a character and a story that you need to weave into these bakes. And so you're not just coming up with this amazing bake, but you have to come up with a story that goes along with your colors and your flavors. So you have to think a lot in this amount of time while you're creating. And so did you just say you can't do any of that ahead of time? You're doing that all in that 2 or 3 hours?
All in the minute. It's all coming together. And I think a big piece of this was like, you make your bake and then you go to judging. So during that time, you kind of have this moment of being like, okay, here's what I did. So for me, around the one with where my cake collapsed, it was like, my cake's falling apart. Like, what am I going to do? So, okay, fine. I got the cake out. I did what I had to do. But then it was like, okay, now between me and judging, I have time to figure out how I'm going to spin this to
Oh,
where, I might be able to pitch it, because the judges don't know
yeah.
what happened during our bakes. They're not there during our bakes. So they don't know that my cake fell apart. They just are seeing the results of what I did in that, I think it was 3 hours. So you have a little bit of time during your judging. Hopefully, some people are a little bit more long-winded than others. You pray, and you get back there, and you're just kind of like, okay, here's this elaborate story I've created for you. So part of you's like, I want to go first because I think my cake's gonna fall apart. But the other part of you's like, let me go last. I have time to like figure this all out in my head and wrap my brain around it. So it was honestly like one of the most challenging things that I've ever done in my life. But like I told you, I just walked away just feeling so validated in what I do and capable and confident. And so it was really positive experience.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm really impressed, extra impressed now that you guys had to create all that stuff on the fly. But I figured you must have to in a way because in an episode that I recently watched, they give the recent winner a reward. And this one guy chose ube as his cake flavor. And people were like, ube, why would you choose ube? And it seemed like a surprise to everybody, that he just came up with that. He didn't just choose chocolate or something more
Yeah.
typical. And then everyone goes running to the back to this wall of ingredients to gather. I'll take the yeast, I'll take this and the coconut and whatever. And I sometimes wonder, are you all banging into each other? And what if everybody wants, the cake flour or something? How are you gathering all your ingredients?
Yeah, so we have like some of the key essentials on your station. It's like sugar. We all have our own little sugar. And then there's a little bit more like on the shelf. And God bless Food Network and their team and the staff and the production company, just everybody there. I figured that they would want us to like struggle and fail because it'd be good TV. They did not. They wanted us to be
Mm.
as successful as we possibly could be. And they were just so kind to me the whole time that I was there. And I wish I could go on top of the rooftops and shout how kind this production was to us, because it meant a lot. And so you run to the back and you're trying to grab whatever you think you're going to need. So that initial run to the back is real. Like that's us literally saying, okay, I know I'm going to need cookie cutters for my cookie. So therefore, I'm going to grab all the cookie cutters that I think I'm going to want, I'm going to put them on my station. Well, I want to emphasize too that we are all still friends. I have a group chat text with my castmates,
Oh,
and we text each other about 2 to 3 times a day still since
wow.
production. So we're really close, and we cheer each other on, and we give each other advice, and just have become really good friends. So one of the things that we made a promise to each other was that we're not going to sabotage. But if you're going to win, you're going to win fair,
Yeah,
right? We
great.
want everybody to do their personal best. So if for whatever reason, like let's say I had the coconut and somebody needed coconut, then they would call and say, I need coconut. And then hopefully I hear them, because I'm also in my own little world, my own little bubble, focusing on myself. But they'll be like, I need coconut. And I say, okay, I have the coconut. And so they would run over to your station. And so that's why you see sometimes in the show us running around. It's
Yeah.
because we're running to someone else's station trying to get the ingredient that we need per se. So that's kind of how it worked. I really didn't have any issues with anything like not having access to it. It was just a challenge. Like it's a true challenge. Like my cake fell apart in episode 2, and I can tell you right now, like in the real world, I would have thrown that cake away and started all over again. But there, it's like, okay, I have to figure this out. And God bless Stacy for running over and helping me and bringing my
Yeah.
acetate. Like that was real. She was like my next door neighbor, and she saw me losing it and was like, "What's going
Yeah.
on with you?"
I noticed
And
that. And then she
ran over
said,
and saved it.
that fridge is open. You should go there. I had made a note of that even from the first episode when maybe you weren't as close. I don't know how much time you spent together ahead of time, but I made a note like people are really supportive of one another. And this is so
Mhm.
nice. It's a competition, quote unquote, but it's not like Survivor or something, like let's just try to scheme and manipulate to get the person. Like
Yep.
you really were supportive of one another. And it's lovely to hear that you're still
Mhm.
friends and
Yeah, I
supportive.
think
Like you have a network now of other bakers around the
yes.
country.
It's really important, I think, to have a community. At first, you didn't know because you get there and you're kind of like, okay, what is it going to be like? Or what kind of competitors we want to be? But I think we just really all clicked very well. It was always like
Yeah.
really sad to see people go, but also to realizing that, it's really truly about your last bake. It didn't matter what you had done before, it mattered how this one turned out.
Yeah, and it's not a kind of like what I tell my kids about grades in school, like, they're not a measure of your human worth. They're just a measure of what's happening right now, so that's what it is. It's just a measure of that particular bake. You're still a great baker.
Exactly. It's just the moment. It's a
Yeah,
moment. But where my mindset is on this is that we are truly all winners. No one lost anything. There were 12 people who beat out probably, I don't know, thousands of people who wanted to be on this show, who probably went through the process just like the rest of us. And we were the lucky ones who landed it. There's not a loser there. Nobody lost anything. We all had our moment. It's a huge blessing for all of us. We're all winners.
so you mentioned you're very classically trained. You have, 4 certificates from the Cordon Bleu, and that you have wedding cakes, and you're a pastry chef and everything, but this show is pretty gory. I mean, fun gory, but in the first episode, they introduce everybody, and some of your competitors
Mhm.
love making these really gory desserts. Did you sometimes feel like, "Wow, that's not really how my brain works. How am I gonna step it up and think about broken bones and bloody fingers and that kind of thing?" Or did you just kinda get into that mindset pretty quickly?
My dad, last week we watched it together, me, my dad, my mom, and my daughter. And my dad said, Adesuwa, you were at a disadvantage. I said, why? He said, because I never took you to a carnival. So you have no point of reference for any of this. He's like, you never have been to a carnival. You've never seen any of this stuff. You never had a fried Oreo. You're living this carnival for the very first time in your life because you have no point of reference. Whereas some of the contestants were like, yeah, me and my dad would go to carnivals 3 times a year, and we would
Uh-huh.
like at our house. I also grew up overseas in Europe. So like Halloween is an American holiday. It's not a European holiday. So
Right.
Halloween for me in Europe was very different than Halloween stateside.
Huh.
What I think my advantage was is that I love scary movies, but I have an 11-year-old daughter, I have a young daughter. So she's been growing up, I've kind of backed off of, the kind of things that I watch on TV so that she doesn't have nightmares at night.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
I hear you on that
so
one,
I
yeah.
think it's that line of like, okay, how do you do something that you're not so familiar with? And I think that was what this was. I'm Christian and prayed a lot. And I was kind of praying that God would just stretch me, and I wanted to try some new things. And so I think I fell into the things that I knew. And luckily, like I said, some of the contestants were really kind. Mandy taught me how to make an eyeball while we were there, and an ear, and showed me how to make an amatomical heart in the room while we were just sitting around bored. She's like, here's how to do this. So I definitely felt stretched, and I definitely felt, okay, well, what do I know how to do well? And definitely I airbrush things all day in my real life. So I was like, I can airbrush, I can shape some things. Here's what I know how to
Yeah.
do. And I was like, okay, how do we add a little bit of blood and guts to that?
How did you feel about the whole judging experience? I know they were having fun too and they get dressed up, but just the fact of it's pretty intense. You've had a limited amount of time to get this thing together and then you have to go present it. Did that feel nerve-wracking to get judged?
I'm a perfectionist. If you ask the producers, you ask the judges, you ask John, they will all tell you that that was one thing that they kept saying to me. You have to check your perfectionism and realize that it's not going to be perfect because you don't have enough time to make it perfect. So you have to be okay with what you do. So I think when I would get done baking something, even the things that I got rave reviews on, I would always walk away with thinking about the 15 things that aren't perfect in that dish. Then you go into judging and you're like ready to get beat up because we had about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 professionals there, right? So I'm one of the professionals. I also think I had like the most education, everybody there. I need to be able to walk in here with like the best of the best, right? Because I have the technique, I have the knowledge, I have the education. And you get into judging and then you're just kind of like, what are you going to say to me? On top of that, I watched Carla Hall as a small child back in the day
Yeah.
on Top Chef. So I grew up, she was one of the people that I admired and have followed her career and tried to follow her footsteps best I can. And has really inspired my career. And to be judged by Carla Hall, somebody that you truly admire, is hard as well. But I do have to say that for me personally, my experience, they were very kind. If the show's edited, of course, highly edited, our judging probably went on for about 20 minutes, but they,
Minutes per contestant?
yeah, about 20 minutes. Like each judge had their
Oh,
piece and they
wow.
gave you a lot of good feedback, but it was mostly for me, it was
Wow.
like, this works beautifully. And if there was something not great, it was like, hey, next time that you do this, do it with this in mind. So, like the powdered sugar comment on my donut, which I had already known it was messed up before I got there. Hey, like next time, sift your powdered sugar. You know better, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I ran out of time. They're like, yeah, we know you ran out of time, but just next time you should sift your powdered sugar. So it wasn't ever something super like negative, and it was never made out to be a personal attack. Like I never felt like they were personally saying like you're not worthy or you're not good. It was just like, hey, in this bake, here's the opportunities that I see. Like Carla Hall called me the flavor queen on episode 1 because every one of my bakes had 15 items in it. So it was a season of validation for me because I walked away from that feeling very, very positive every single time, no matter how hard the bake was. They were so sweet and so kind, all of them, from Stephanie to Zach to all of them, had the best advice and just really, really great people.
Do you feel like any of the advice you can take to your business, or was it all more just for kind of fun Halloween or theme type desserts?
I've taken things from their feedback already and implemented it into the things that I do here. I had a routine of like baking, reflecting, going to judging, and coming back, and I wrote down all the comments, bad and good, in a notebook. I still have that notebook. So I wrote down all my comments that they gave me, and then I wrote myself a little message, journaled about how I processed it. On some things, they might have said, hey, I think you should consider adding some salt to this, or, more acid or less acid or whatever. So I've come back since then. And as when I'm remaking some of these things, with a lot of the components in my bakes, like my raspberry jam, I make that all the time. That's one of our 3 main jams. The 2 cakes that we had, they were there. Stephanie said, girl, you can bake a good cake all day. And her comment was last time about, which I forgot, I didn't have that one in my notebook. Are you flirting with me? Like that was a cute comment. So
Yeah, that
like,
was so
it
cute. I
was
love
super, super
that.
cute comment. So like he had the critiques that they had for me, I did. And then like with the German chocolate cake, now I do use 3 types of coconut because I did it there and she liked it. So I've taken that home with me. And now when you order German chocolate cake, it has 3 different types of coconut in there. So yeah, if I had spoken to you prior to the production, like even a month before the production, I wouldn't have known I was going to be there. So it was just kind of like a huge opportunity. And that's what I took it as, was like, this is a huge opportunity for me to grow and for me to become more confident and to trust myself. And so that's how I took that experience home with me.
Was it strange to be at your station and creating and then to have cameras coming into your face, or to have John, who's the host, come up and say, Hey, Adesuwa, I see that you're making this and, to have to be witty and to have some conversation. Did you sometimes feel like, wait, I'm focusing and by the way, this is my time and the minutes are clicking down? Did that throw you off ever?
No. I mean, the cameras, they were there. There was a lot of them, but it was just an experience.
Maybe
I
you
wasn't
kind of
really
get
too
used to
bothered by
them.
the I think you do. Now I'm kind of like wishing that they would come home with me. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'll make a video for TikTok, and then I'm like, oh, I need a camera crew. Um, no, but they weren't like in your space or anything like that. You do have to like communicate a lot with them. So I think that was strange because I'm a very silent. Like European kitchens are quiet kitchens, so I'm very used to like a quiet kitchen. So I just wanted to like be quiet and concentrate and think, and you have to like verbalize what you're doing or verbalize like, okay, I'm going to go to the oven because the cameraman needs to know that, okay, let's go to the oven. Or,
I
hey, I'm
see.
going to go pull my, like, you have to tell them where you're going. So that was something that you had to consciously be aware of. I think John was great. He was very helpful. During that bake where my cake collapsed, he came over and spoke to me for a little bit. I had a meltdown and I was upset with myself. So I was like, how does a person with like literally 17 international awards for cakes go home on a cake challenge? Like that was just going to be the worst day ever. I was like, how embarrassing. But you're saying like, you're never going to sell another cake again. Like, who's going to trust you to make a cake if you can't even make a cake on TV? Right. So I had my moment and then I had gone away and then John came over and asked me how I was doing. Like I had, like, after the cake, Stacey and I had fixed the cake. They were like, just take a minute and like gather yourself, like, cause you have no time. But really my cake was falling apart. So there's nothing I could have really done in the first place. And he came over and just kind of talked to me. Hey, how's it going? You're going to be okay. You're not the first one this happened to. Like, don't worry. He was just very, very supportive. So sometimes I feel like the conversations with John were very necessary and timely based off of what we were going through. And I didn't really mind him. And he was really fun to be around. When you get into a situation that you've always kind of wanted and you get it, it's just for me, it was like, I'm going to not take this for granted. I'm going to embrace every minute. Like when I went to do my interview, when I went to have lunch that day, whatever it was that I was doing, I tried to show gratitude to this team, like the people that were working there, to myself, to my castmates, of just being like, I'm grateful to be here. Like I want to be here. I chose to be here. And I've been chosen to be here. And I really didn't take anything for granted. And I'm happy that I didn't take anything for granted. That
That's
was most
lovely.
important to me.
I think that attitude comes through too. But everyone has those moments and it's a very human experience too. Oh, my cake is falling. And then you have that sort of good cop, bad cop thing going on in your head and you start doubting yourself. I mean, we all have that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're like, why is this voice being so mean to me right now while I'm in the middle of this live show? I mean, not live, but the clock is ticking and you
Yeah.
want us to keep focusing. But I mean, we all have that, especially I talk a lot on the show about perfectionism and that can be to our own detriment. It's such a human core experience, but you got through it. And I'm glad that John could be a help on that. Because often on the show, what we see is his really funny quips, and he's doing these quick interactions with people, but he's also there to support people, it sounds like, at times of need.
Yeah. Yeah, there was more than one disaster. That was the disaster that got shown, and they showed it in a very nice way because I think it was a whole lot worse than what you guys got to see at home. Watching that episode, I was so nervous going into it. I had a bottle of champagne. I was like really nervous. I was like, I'm gonna look so stupid on TV, and they edited like. God bless the production company. It was edited so kindly in a way, which they told me before. The producers were like, we're not going to let you go out there and look stupid. We want you to be the professional that we know you are. Like, no matter how bad or good it is, we're not going to let you look bad. And they edited it in such a way that it looked like I was a genius several times on different things. And I think what I was proud of is honestly when I think he said like 20 minutes on the clock. And I was like, I have to frost this cake. Like that was really, I had 20 minutes on the clock to frost my cake. So when it was all said and done, even though I do think it looks a little bit sloppy, I was like, okay, you had a cake fall apart, fixed it, frosted it, decorated it, got it done in 20 minutes. And then you had to wait for judging, whatever period of time that was, which I don't even remember. And you did it. And they got it and they loved it. So that for me, again, was that validation that, okay, like I'm good. So now I find myself in sticky situations here where things aren't quite working out at home with my home bakes, then I'm like, okay, well, hey, you did a cake in 20 minutes. You can figure this out. Like, you can do this. You've literally done the impossible and yet somehow prevailed. I think where the emotion from me on that bake was like, I'm out of time. At the time before Stacy came over, I was like, I'm done. Like I was just like, there's no way I can pull this off. I never put together a cake like that.
Yeah.
It was that broken, and then fixed it in 20 minutes. I had never done that, but now I can say I have.
Created a new challenge for yourself, a challenge within the
I did.
challenge.
I did. Now my new thing since being back home and baking is like, okay, I got to frost faster. So now I time myself to see how fast I can frost cakes. So I'm like, I gotta get my frost time down. When I get to like 8 minutes, it'd be great. If I could frost a cake in 8 minutes, that'd be like
Oh my
ideal.
gosh.
I'm
That's
at like 15, but I'm working on it.
impressive.
Small life
Wow.
goals.
That's real professionalism. I'm glad that
Small goals.
you feel like the editing was fair, because I think that could be nerve-wracking for anyone who gets involved in any sort of reality show. Is you're turning your, not your life, but your portrayal over to the producers. And some people, I think in some shows I've read, feel like, oh, I came out looking more like a villain or something. This is other types of shows, maybe not baking shows as much. But I'm glad that you feel, at least what you've seen so far, that it seems like it's a fair portrayal for you and probably your competitors as well.
Yeah. I think we all look good. I think it's been very, very fair thus far. I don't foresee it changing. I put a lot of good energy out there during my time on the show, so I hope that I get good energy back on the show.
Is there any sort of rehearsal? I mean, it seems like you guys know where to stand at the beginning. Like you all look very good up there when John is talking to you and everything. It's not chaotic, really, I guess, until you're going to run.
No, there's no rehearsal. They just show us a map. Well, not even a map. They just line us up and say, okay, this is where, like, literally right before we're walking, here's the floor plan of like where you're going to stand. You're sitting, you're sitting, you're standing, you're whatever. All right, go. And then we just walk out there and that's it. There's no rehearsal.
Did you just get yourself in a certain frame of mind? Do you like do a little mantra or meditation or something before taping to say, like, I don't know, I can do this, I'm a creative person or whatever? Because like you mentioned, it's a very different experience than your day-to-day life, even though it's still baking. The time frame is different, the attention is different, the talking is different, the community around you is different. How did you adjust to that?
Yeah, I think for me, honestly and truthfully, I just prayed every day. I woke up in the morning and I had a YouTube subscription and I would listen to a sermon from someone that I liked I felt inspirational. And then I would kind of sit there for a little bit and I'd put my headphones on because I needed to like drown out the noise. So everybody was excited or had their theories of what was about to go down. And naturally, like you listen to what they say. And so you start preparing for that and then you get in there and it's not that at all. So you kind of start planning, okay, this first challenge is going to be, I don't know, underwater basket weaving. Okay, great. So you're like, okay, well, how would I weave a basket? So you're sitting there subconsciously like planning on like, how am I going to make a basket out of cake? And then you get in there and you're like, okay, you're making tiramisu. And then you're just
Yeah.
completely thrown off. So my strategy was like, okay, let me just stay in my own lane and keep myself calm. And then I was just always very nervous because this is the first time that we're all seeing each other's bakes. We had never seen each other's bakes. Like you go in there, you bake your stuff, you put your stuff up, they take a picture and you leave. So you don't see what anybody else is doing. So in the back, everybody's describing what they've done. You're like, okay,
Wow.
great. Wow, you hand painted this tarot card and you did all this crazy stuff. And what did you do? And you made a dragon that was blowing smoke and
Oh,
they're selling it to you like they did something. So this is the very first time that you're like, oh, okay, now I see what you did.
yes.
Now I understand. But I think you start listening to that and then you naturally are like, okay, well, I have to go harder because they went
Yeah.
crazy. And then nobody ever says that they didn't do great on something.
Mm.
Everybody's always going to pretend like what they made was like the best, God's greatest
Spectacular.
creation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like this
Uh-huh.
is the best thing in the world. So I just really, for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to get really quiet and I don't want to talk about it. And I just want to sit in my own little space and have my headphones on, listen to music or whatever it was, and just try to like center myself and then try to get my emotions and my nerves in check and just know that, okay, what's for me is what's for me. And I'm here for a reason and I'm here to do something and I'm going to get out there and just do my best. And that's honestly what I did. And it really didn't matter what anyone else did because whatever's for me is for me, I guess, at the end of the day. If it's meant for me to be the ultimate winner, great. If it's meant for me to go home first, great. Whatever my role is what I'm going to do here.
It sounds a little bit like athletes. You see swimmers at the Olympics or something, and they've got their headphones on. And it's like you just got to stay in your zone, right? Because you
Hmm.
can't be distracted by everybody else's literal and figurative noise. But
Yeah.
also, what you were saying is about people trying to imagine what's it going to be? What's this next thing? I think as humans, we all want to try to feel like we're in control. And if we can
Yes.
try to, oh, it's going to be a pie with the this and the that or whatever. And then we can impose our will on that. And then we've got control of the situation. But in fact, we have no idea what this day is going to bring
Hmm.
or what, in this case, that bake is going to bring. And so then we've just thrown everything off because then we have to do a complete right turn to what the reality is. So it's a much
Yep.
wiser approach to just kind of be present and just stay like you were with your headphones on, be where you are, and take what comes.
Yeah, I think it was like right after tiramisu, because once they told us it was tiramisu, we were all like, okay, cool. We're making regular coffee chocolate
Yeah,
tiramisu.
yeah.
So in my head, I was like, I'm gonna make a hazelnut tiramisu. So I was looking around like, okay, I'm gonna get hazelnuts. Like in my head, I had already decided what I was gonna do. And then they were like, now come up here and grab a card so you can determine what flavor you're gonna make. But you just put like, I don't even know, about 3 minutes of thought and made a definitive decision on what I'm about to do. So I've already figured out how I'm gonna play this game. Like, I already made my decision. I'm doing hazelnuts. I'm going to toast them. I'm going to make this crumble. I'm going to do all this stuff to the tiramisu. And then they're like, come pull the card. And I grab limoncello. And I'm like, great. Now what? Limoncello and hazelnuts, last time I checked, don't go together at all.
Not gonna be a
So
great mix.
yes, I don't think so. So it was hard. It was challenging, but I think that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the twists the most. Like I
Ah,
enjoyed the creativity of the twists the most. I think that time is hard when you're dealing with something that you haven't dealt with before, like new ingredients or putting new flavor combinations together that maybe you haven't, like I had never had limoncello and raspberry. I mean, I knew it would work, right? Because lemons and raspberry go well
mhm.
together, but I had never made that together. So for me, I needed to like taste and taste and taste and taste and fix and fix and fix. And you don't always have the time to do that. So I feel like I would lose time trying to make sure they came together. And then also too, they were sneaky. Like you'd be waiting for a twist. So like my German chocolate cake, I was nervous picking it because I was like, well, I'm gonna pick this German chocolate cake, and then they're gonna be like, add, I don't know, ground beef to it or something crazy. And then now my whole plan is messed up. So as it went along, you're like, okay, let me get as generic as possible. Let me not get too like
Oh,
focused on a flavor because you wanted to have a way out.
a little out, be a little nimble somewhere because something's
Right,
coming.
right. So then I had like, I'm gonna do chocolate cake, probably German chocolate, because by the time that I get done baking my cake, and my cake's up, you're calculating now. Like I'll be at about an hour and 10 minutes, and I'll be just, at this stage. And then that's when they're gonna throw this challenge out at me and they're gonna figure it out. And then they told us cookies, and I was like not mentally prepared for cookies because I had already decided in my head that it was going to be a add this ingredient to your bake, not bake another item. So it throws you. They're sneaky over there.
But again, I guess that's another little metaphor for life, right? You don't know what's coming. Be
You
creative.
don't. You don't. Take a deep breath and keep going.
So most of us, well, we'll never be on a show like that, but also we'll never be as accomplished a baker as you are. Do you have any tips or what do you think it takes to be a good baker? What can
I
we learn
think
you?
I think pastry is a science, and I think that you have to be scientific about it and measure your ingredients correctly and triple check your list and just be specific. I know I keep talking about time, but give yourself time to bake and realize, okay, this is going to take a while, and that little 3 ounce, 3 grams missing here and 5 grams over here is going to matter eventually. So I would just be very specific. My sister can't. My sister, I love my sister to death, but she can't bake. She's not a baker. But I think it's a lack of attention to detail. Like if you can't bake, it's because you're not paying attention to the instructions, probably. But it's
Yeah,
challenging.
it is.
I
Some
I,
people love
I
to
enjoy,
cook because they can
yeah,
just throw in a little more of this, a little more of that. But baking, you actually have to follow the.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed cooking more. I never thought, honestly, that I would ever have like pastry was never what I was ever going to do. I was always going to be a cuisine chef. If you'd asked any of my chefs, they told me a while ago, you're going to be a pastry chef. And I said, no, I'm not. And they were like, yes, you are. You like money and you're specific. You like budgeting and all that kind of stuff. Because pastries, well, used to be affordable to do. Now commodity products are the most expensive things on the market, honestly. But they were like, no, you're going to be a pastry chef. And I was like, no, there's no way I'm going to be focusing on just cuisine. And so I do find it freeing. Like once you get the base down, then how versatile you can make things as you go. That's always been really fun to try to figure out, okay, where can I push a flavor? How hard can I push it before I break it? So that's fun.
I've never heard that phrase. I love it. How hard you can push a flavor till you break it.
So then you're on Halloween Baking Championship episode 2.
You can push a lot of things on that show. Well, I can't wait to keep watching and to see what happens with you and your friends. And we'll call them competitors anymore. I love that you're all still friends.
We are friends.
Thank you for this behind the scenes look. It's been so fascinating and it's been really fun to get to know you. And sometime if I'm in San Antonio, I'll come to your shop and get to see what flavors you're pushing to the limit.
Please. Yes, please. As we push them until they almost break. Flavor first and then figure out how to make it look pretty. But no, thank you. I had so much fun here hanging out with you. And thank you for spending some time with me.
It was so fun to talk with Adesuwa about her experiences on the Halloween Baking Championship. I do want to mention that a PR person was sitting in on the interview on behalf of the Food Network because I wasn't allowed to ask certain questions, and if I did, I had to cut them out. So if you're wondering why I didn't ask certain things, that's the reason. But I still felt like I was able to get a good sense from it about what it was like to be on the show. Here are some of my takeaways from our conversation. Number 1. Childhood dreams can come true. There's no one recipe to making them happen, but hard work, perseverance, and a good attitude are always good ingredients. 2. Perfectionism can get us in trouble, even if we don't have a literal clock ticking down the seconds until our bake needs to get presented to the judges. Do the best you can, appreciate what you've done, and move on. 3. Even when things are falling apart, literally like a cake, or figuratively, you can pause, be in the moment, and embrace the experience, and not take it for granted. 4. When you accomplish something for the first time, applaud yourself. Not many people can fix, frost, and decorate a cake in 20 minutes. If you did that amazing thing, think of what else you can do. 5. Trying to control the future is fruitless. Stay focused on what you know and what you can control, and don't get distracted by other people. And finally, number 6. You don't know what's coming next. Be creative. Take a deep breath and keep going. Big thanks to Adesuwa Elaiho for taking the time to talk with me. If you want to watch her and her friends, the Halloween Baking Championship is streaming now on the Food Network through the end of October. For more information about Adesuwa and her pastry shop in San Antonio, go to the show notes for this episode. If you like listening to interviews with women who have made careers out of baking, you might want to listen to episode 40 with Nancy Mueller, who created a multi-million-dollar business empire as the Queen of Quiche, and episode 18 when Rebecca Firth talked about writing cookbooks and her popular baking blog, Displaced Housewife. You can find all of our past episodes and links to our social media accounts on our website, whatitslike2.net. If you haven't yet subscribed to this podcast, please do, and please tell a few friends about it too. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thanks for being curious about what it's like.